Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakodash, Barakathom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, the great millstone who rule and teach well. In peace and salutations to Yahakim out there pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Raya with another video, and I'm going to be reading from an article on SHTF, or shithitsthefan.plan.com, titled U.S. Gets Its Ass Handed to It in World War III Simulation. This brings you to my first precept in Isaiah 55:11. So shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. And one of the main prophecies to be fulfilled in these scriptures is the destruction of Babylon the Great, which is the biblical name of the United States of America, by 200 million nuclear missiles that are going to hit this place and turn it into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea. That battle of Armageddon, which is only going to take place after the mandatory implementation of the mark of the beast, which is that microchip implant. But up until then, Babylon the Great's going to be in a state of collapse, which you can clearly see is going on in the United States. The U.S. economy could go literally any day now. You've got mainstream media pundits now saying that to expect another collapse by the end of 2019 or 2020. A lot of jobs are being shipped out of the country or automated. A lot of these Edomites are addicted to opioids and dying by the hundreds daily. Racial tensions are building up, not just between the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, which are the true children of Israel, and these Edomites are so-called white people, but between all the nations living in this country. Civil unrest is rife between those that consider themselves conservatives and those that consider themselves liberal, and the U.S. military is extending itself all around the globe to try to combat Russia and China, pivoting to the South China Sea to contain China, building missile batteries in Europe to contain Russia, staying in the Middle East to help Israel gain hegemony in the region. But it's all for naught because the United States, again, Babylon the Great, is going to be utterly annihilated. In a simulated World War III scenario, the U.S. continues to lose against Russia and China. Two top war planners warned last week, and it's biblical that it loses against Russia because Russia's going to be the main country coming against the United States. In our games, when we fight Russia and China, blue gets its ass handed to it, RAND analyst David Oshmanek said Thursday. RAND's war games show how U.S. armed forces, colored blue on war game maps, experience the most substantial losses in one scenario after another and still can't thwart Russia or China, which predictably is red, from accomplishing their objectives, annihilating Western forces. So even these Edomites' own scenario systems are saying that the U.S. is not going to win. We lose a lot of people. We lose a lot of equipment. We usually fail to achieve our objective of preventing aggression by the adversary, he warned. And the majority of U.S. losses are going to be in that Middle East region, which is where that battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat is going to take place. If you're a U.S. soldier that finds yourself there, you better start coming to terms with that being your final resting place. In the next military conflict, which some may believe may come as soon as the mid-2020s, all 5 battlefield domains, land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace, will be heavily contested, suggesting the U.S. could have a difficult time in achieving superiority as it has in prior conflicts, and it won't achieve superiority. It'll only achieve defeat, all through the will of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, his word which will not return unto him void. And I got a quick diagram here that I'll leave for a few seconds if you brothers want to pause the video and read it. The simulated war games showed the red aggressor force often destroys U.S. F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters on the runway, sends several naval fleets to the depths, destroys U.S. military bases, and through electronic warfare, takes control of critical military communication systems. In short, a gruesome, if simulated, annihilation of some of the most modern of U.S. forces. And admittedly, the United States military is very powerful, but with it being spread thin by trying to maintain its empire globally, these other nations are coming up with ways to counter its military might. It's called asymmetric warfare, where the U.S. may have a lot of anti-missile defense systems, but then the Russians and the Chinese will create hypersonic missiles that are nuclear capable, that are capable to get past those anti-missile defense systems, and also electronic warfare, which China's heavily invested in. They could just do that to turn off all these defense systems that the U.S. has and leave their ass hanging in the breeze. And even on top of that, a lot of U.S. Navy ships use Chinese-manufactured microchips, and you can clearly see a conflict of interest there. In every case I know of, said Robert Work, a former Deputy Secretary of Defense with years of wargaming experience, the F-35 rules the sky when it's in the sky, but it gets killed on the ground in large numbers through asymmetric warfare. So as Russia and China develop fifth-generation fighters and hypersonic missiles, things that rely on sophisticated base infrastructure like runways and fuel tanks are going to have a hard time, Oshmanek said. Things that sail on the surface of the sea are going to have a hard time. That's why the 2020 budget coming out next week retires the carrier USS Truman decades early and cuts 2 amphibious landing ships, as we've reported. It's also why the Marine Corps is buying the jump jet version of the F-35, which can take off and land from tiny ad hoc airstrips. But how well they can maintain a high-tech aircraft in low-tech surroundings is an open question, said Breaking Defense, Slovakia. And I find that spiritual that they're planning on retiring the USS Truman because Harry Truman was the president that allowed for the atomic bombs, the first ever atomic weapons to be used, to be dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Meanwhile, speaking purely hypothetically, of course, if we went to war in Europe, there would be one Patriot battery moving, and it would go to Ramstein, and that's it. Work complained. The U.S. has 58 brigade combat teams across the continent, but doesn't have anti-air and missile defense capabilities required to handle a barrage of missiles from Russia, those hypersonic missiles. And as I'm sure a lot of you know, that INF treaty fell apart, which is leading to both the U.S. and Russia rebuilding their nuclear arms stockpiles. And with that being the case, you're going to see during this Battle of Armageddon, the U.S.'s allies in Europe turn against the U.S. and ally themselves with Russia because they know that if and when, which it will break out, a nuclear war, that Europe's going to be the front line of a nuclear exchange between the U.S. and Russia. So they're going to try to hedge their bets and pick what they'll see as the winning side, which will be the Russians and the Chinese, which is what these World War III scenarios are showing that the RAND Corporation has been running. RAND also wargamed cyber and electronic attacks in the simulations, Work said. Russia and China tend to cripple U.S. communication networks. Whenever we have an exercise and the Red Force really destroys our command and control, we stop the exercise, Work said without a trace of humor. Beijing calls this system destruction warfare, Work said. They aim to attack the American battle network at all levels, relentlessly, and they practice it all the time. The Air Force asked RAND to formulate a plan several years ago to improve the outcome of the war games in favor of the U.S., Oshmanek said. We found it impossible to spend more than $8 billion a year to fix the problems. And it's all through the Willi Yahweh Hashem Yahushai that these problems won't be fixed, and that Babylon the Great will be utterly annihilated in this upcoming World War III, this Battle of Armageddon. Let's get into some precepts. This is Jeremiah 51. I'm going to read verse 1 through 3. Thus saith Yahweh, whose word shall not return unto him void. Behold, I will raise up against Babylon the biblical name of the United States of America, and against them that dwell in the midst of them that rise up against me, a destroying wind, those nuclear missiles, and I will send unto Babylon fanners that shall fan her and shall empty her land, utterly annihilate it, turning it into a wasteland that only desert creatures will inhabit. For in the day of trouble they shall be against her round about, not just the U.S.'s enemies such as Russia and China, but its allies as well, such as Britain and France and Germany. Against him that bendeth, let the archer bend his bow, and against him that lifteth himself up in his brigadine, and spare ye not her young men, destroy ye utterly all her host.